Hi guys, so welcome to my new series, How I Compose. I want to sort of show my thoughts and processes of writing music, and if I'm any bit credible, sort of give an insight into numerical composition, because I feel this topic isn't really deeply explored, and I do it hours every day, so I think it sort of merits at least someone talking about it. I pretty much take most, if not all, of my inspiration from the sugar, and that's probably going to be apparent over here in the video. So let's get into it. I'm going to take one of the songs from one of my albums called Lacrosse. It's sort of, like all my music's basically a full concept. It's meant to be listened to at once, and it sort of uses thematic principles that are varied and permutated throughout the whole of the album. So before I get into the actual song, I'm going to sort of talk about the main riff or main theme of the album first, so you sort of understand how it relates. You can see it here. It's the repetition of bars 1 and 2. It's 7/8 riff over sort of 4/4 polymeter. So I'll get into that bit later, but let's just hear it first. Okay. So the sort of secret to the harmony around this chord is it brings together sort of 12-tone note harmony on the octave with numerical octave harmony, and it sort of merges the two, and it acts as a gateway of looking at our normal keyboard based C, D, E, F, G way of thinking of harmony and taking that and then further progressing it into my world of numerical harmony. So I'm going to show you that here. So the first chord we have is a 1 and 4 on different strings. So if you have 1 and 3 here, it's a perfect octave. Nobody really calls it a perfect octave except me. That's going to be referenced later. So you can hear that, and if you look here, we've got a B because it's first fret, so that's an octave B. But what I do is I sharpen the second note, the octave higher, to a 4, so you get a clash, and again a play on the octave. And then the second bar we have 2, and if we have 4 we'd have again the perfect octave, but this time it would be on C, so it would be a semitone higher than the last chord. However, playing around the octave, I flatten this one by a semitone or a number. We get 2, 3. So this one sounds like this compared to this. Or that, sorry. But what you actually notice, if you look at it on sort of conventional harmony level, they're actually the same notes, regarded they're at different octaves. But this note is the same as this note, and this 4 is the same as this 2. So numerically they're completely different chords. I would you'd never consider them alike looking at them in the tab and looking at them the way I compose, but if you look at them from a conventional harmony perspective, they're almost the same thing. So I find that really subtly adds the whole harmonic contradiction throughout the album that brings together keyboard harmony, or whatever you want to call it, with numerical harmony. So that's really nice. So let's get into the song. So we've got about 151 bars of music going throughout this song. It's probably around 4 or 5 minutes, probably just over 5 hopefully. 135 BPM. So it starts off at 15/8, and it starts off with a 4-bar riff, heavily polymetric riff, borderline polyrhythm. I'm going to get into that in a minute, but let's hear this 4-bar riff. Okay, so that's that. That's the first riff of the song. So looking at it, you can see how it relates to the theme I was just showing you before. Differences are we've got a slightly different rhythm, and it's all palm muted. I guess you could call this a problem with Tykes guitar. I don't think it's a problem, just the MIDI representation of palm muting isn't that strong, so the guitar kind of sounds a bit weak, but you just know when you play sort of heavy palm muted chords, it actually are louder than, it's decibelically louder than when you play a normal chord, so that's quite nice. So we get this sort of 3 semiquaver rhythm or dotted quaver rhythm up there. And that's why each of these top time signatures are a multiple of 3. We have to have that. And again, it links to polyrhythms and polymeters. I'll get into a slightly more complex description in one sec. So we get this. And on the end, we have just a little bit to break up the rhythm, and it makes a nice transition into the next bar where we get the second chord, slightly less. And then again, so it's just counting really, this first riff. So I want to get into what a polymeter is. So polymeter is a whole rhythm that is broken up and phrased as a combination of other subset rhythms. So you can see what we have here is a whole rhythm of this 4 bars, and we have constant crotchet beats. So what you're hearing on the drums, except for the little bit at the beginning, it's pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty much 4/4. I mean, it's not, but you can think of it like 4/4 because we've got the snare basically on the 3rd hit of every 4/4 bar, and you know, China number 52 is the China symbolically hitting on every crotchet like that, and then that's subdivided here into this. So that's basically what a polyrhythm is, and I tentatively call it a polymeter. It's not strictly one, because for a polymeter you sort of need different variations of time, so you'd need triplets, quintuplets, I believe, or whatever you want to call them. You technically need them to have a polymeter. In some descriptions, the definition's dodgy on Wikipedia because nobody really talks about polyrhythms to this extent. You could call it polymetric because it plays on the sort of tripleted time, but it's not strictly, so I wouldn't call it that. Anyway, so we get that 4 times, and we get a little accenting on the drums, and we have a fill here, which leads into the next section. So this section I'm going to play first of all without the lead guitar. So let me mute this. Not the bass. Cool. So let's give this a listen. Okay. I said I wasn't going to mute the lead guitar. I made a bit of a mistake. I don't really know what happened, but it played. It's fine. Basically we get a 7/8 rhythm. The 7/8 is key to the album, as you saw before from the main sort of theme. Slightly different rhythm. Again, we're playing on the 2nd chord, 2/3. Again, you can see it here, but it's broken up this time, so it's not played strictly as a chord, and we get little bends there just to add some nice accenting. I want to talk about the lead line. I'm going to play it again. Now, I could have made it a bit more eloquently in Tuck's guitar. The 8 is meant to be a slow bend all the way up to the 9, and then the 9 comes down. To do that in Tuck's guitar, I need to put them in 2 tracks, so I was a bit lazy and didn't do that. I really wanted the lead guitar, because you play the riff on its own, it sounds good, but it's a bit bare, and I really think the lead guitar added a level of shock, like true shock, that I think was hard to convey just on the riff alone. So the transition is really quite nice, of going from the palm mute to the guitar, which is quite self-contained with these locked up chords, onto the openness and the revelation that follows. So if you sort of hear the transition, I think you'll understand what I mean. You know, it's true clarity, sort of, you know. So that's that, and it moves on to the 3 on the low F string, and we get a bit of dissonance with the 3 and the 2. That's an outright clash. The bass sticks to the 3, but it's quite wibbly wobbly on the low end, so it's kind of hard to hear which note it truly is, which is nice. We lose the bends there. Okay, and then it does this twice, and then it goes to another permutation of the riff. Okay, so now we get this riff, and it's heavily based on the first riff. As you can see, it takes the 15/8 and 9/8 rhythm, which are the first 2 bars at the beginning, as you can see there. So we get them, and it just repeats that, but what's different is we get it on the F string now, and we get a full proper octave, and then we get a similar chord with the octave going up by a number, and it's not all palm muted, it's only the 4 that's palm muted. So if you just want to hear these 2 bars. And this is really nice because it's 3 bars of 4/4, as you can see here. That's 1 bar of 4/4. We get another, then we get a third, essentially, or something like that. Because you can see the snare hit comes on every 3rd beat, and then we get the 4th beat here, and that concludes it. So it's a nicer rhythmical distribution, or easier, not nicer, I guess, than the first riff. So we get that, and then we get this riff. Now this is another thematic chord. It comes first in the first song, and this is quite nice because we get 8/10, bit crunchy, bit interesting, and then we get that contrasted with a 6/7. They're pretty much the same notes, as you can see by the 6 to the 8. But then you get the 7 here, so there's an outright clash. And it's a 26/8 rhythm. It's pretty cumbersome. It's not really nice to have it notated like that. I've basically done that because if you see here, it's not a perfect rhythm. We get 1 semiquaver here, so it's not. It's it's having 4 at the end instead of just 3. So it adds a bit of, I guess, interest, or breaks up the rhythm a bit. So if you want to hear it. You can hear that the little semiquaver at the end of the bar really pushes it forward again and breaks it up. So that's that riff. It does that 4 times, I believe. Yep. And then we get back into this riff again that we heard before, without the lead guitar. And what I want to talk about is really sort of how to play on different rhythms. And you can see that in these 2 bars, really in the drums. I'm really sort of testing the idea of the 4/4 polymetric contradiction. So if you listen from here, that's all nice. That you could, it's 7/8, but it's got 4 underlying 4/4. But when you listen to it 2 bars before, I'm really highlighting the emphasis of the 7/8, and I'm not sticking to the crotchet beats. I'm placing the cymbals, accenting the guitar rather than accenting the 4/4 crotchet. It's a really useful technique when starting new sections or adding fills or added interest in riffs. It's in every Meshuggah song. So if you listen to the 2 bars together, you can hear the contradiction, and it's really nice. It's 100% rhythmically satisfying, and I think that's why it's used. It's a build-up of tension, and then just suddenly released when you get the 4/4 underlying drums again. They're not strictly 4/4. Okay, and then we get a different riff here. This riff is really quite weird. I tried to make it as weird as possible. I think I did quite a good job. I had to use 2 notated drum kits here. I'll explain why in a minute. So it revolves around 2 bars, a 7/8 and a 15/16, which is rhythmically, they hardly ever match up. It's pretty hard when writing polymeters with this, because it's going to take a long time to come back in sync. But if you just want to hear it. If you notice, it's really gritty and actually quite awkward, and it's not, I guess you could say it's definitely not pleasant. And the reason that is it's polymetrically out of sync, and I actually haven't seen this before, or at least I don't believe I've seen it before in this way. It's if you listen to Song Nigel Within by Frederick, it's definitely done in there, but it's not as emphasized as I've made it here. So if you look here, we get the crotchet hits every 3 triplets, and that falls evenly when these 3 triplets end. This next beat starts. That's fine, but because we've got a bar of 15/16, a semiquaver doesn't fit in evenly to really any sort of amount of tripleted or any small amount of tripleted quavers. So as you can see here, the crotchet hit lies just outside of here, so it doesn't actually match up with any of the triplets. You can see here again, it's out of sync. It's mathematically, you can't like write them on the same stem, sort of almost. You can't do that because they are mathematically out of sync. It's not a question of one being divided by half by another. You can't really calculate that to a certain extent. You definitely can calculate it, but not in this sense. So it's a really odd technique, and it sounds really odd because it's like having two different pieces of music almost played at the same time, because it's just so outright different. So that's really quite an interesting technique, and I think it should be explored more. I guess I'll do it in the future. So it does that twice. And then we get just the repetition of the 15, 16 bar. It's an even bar when you add the dotted quavers. It just is an even bar, so it's quite nice against the 4/4 hits. And that goes on for a bit. And then we get this riff, and this riff really incorporates the beginning of the album in sort of a different way. So this 6/8 rhythm is actually the first bar of the album that you hear, and then I mix it with the chord again, and then you hear it again, and it plays a chord for but not as long. So let's play that. Okay. So what's quite interesting is we get both the 2/3 and the 1/4 at the same time. Really nice double octave clash. And it's actually, again, 3 bars of 4/4, as you can see here, so that's really nice. It's slightly broken up by this sort of bars, treated as almost a fill. And then the 4/4 drums come in. So we get that. And then it does it again, but this time it does it with the lead guitar of what we saw before. It's a slightly different rhythm, but it's essentially the same principle. And I really think this brings in the shock from before, and together, because this is a theme we've had before, brings it with the understanding. So it's just, I can only describe it as a musical revelation, is what it feels like to me. It's really quite inspiring, if I can say so. So it's really quite a good riff, so I'll play it. Yeah, so I mean, it's really powerful. I think I was really happy with that when I composed it. The whole song basically builds up to that one moment of just true clarity, and I think it really is good. And then we get the main riff again, or the first riff rather, that comes back, and sort of to end the song, I added this little emphasis bar, and then carried it on in 6/8, and this sort of ending is sort of the palm muted ending with the clash and the 2 and 3. It's kind of a bit like the ending of Neurotica. It's just to add a little more breakup, so you sort of have time to think about what you heard. So if you hear the ending, and that goes on. So that's basically a brief and really quick overview of one of my songs. Hopefully it sort of gave an insight onto thematic and numerical writing, and hopefully you guys find it interesting. So thank you for watching.